Yeah, welcome to the new reality, and hopefully you all got a chance to look at the remainder of the competition presentation.
You changed it, like you added some slides.
Oh, I did, because that's my style to change things periodically. Did I not post the updated slides?
No, you did.
You
I
did.
just wanted to make sure.
Oh, I did, okay, all right. Yeah, okay. So I guess what I want to do is begin with asking questions about your lab reports, the hauling data. How's that going?
I think it's going pretty good.
I'm struggling with the intro more than anything, I think.
Okay, what are you struggling with about the intro?
I think just like getting started, and then also, I mean, I know that one of the stipulations is include 3 papers that have been published since hauling that shed light on functional responses. And just finding like papers to use that are relevant and that like make it flow and actually are useful, you know?
Well, isn't that a tricky thing about writing in science? It's always finding, you know, the task of finding literature that is relevant and useful. Luckily, in the weeks since you left, weeks since you left, ProQuest has opened up some of its archives, and a number of the things that used to be paywalled are no longer paywalled because of the coronavirus. So you might actually have, what's that?
What's that called?
ProQuest it's a paid subscription service that gives you access to primary literature. So 2 things that I would do. Have you guys relied upon the library's website?
Yeah.
You guys know about the library's website, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So go to the library's website, log on to databases, go to Web of Science, which is probably the best place for you to get things. Type in Hauling's paper, so Hauling 1959. And when you get that paper, I think it's 59, isn't it?
I think I found it's 69 or 59.
Well, I'll go look.
I think that there might be like multiple things.
There are definitely at least 2 papers.
Yeah, so the one that you guys have is 59. And there was actually one published in the same year that was a field study looking at the same issue. Anyway, you could type in either of those. Here, let me just do this. Going to be disorienting for just a minute because I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Go to library. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go down here and go to databases. And when you go to general sciences, because chemistry, I guess, is not a general science, go to Web of Science. So you can go to author, so put in C.S. Hauling's name, and then, go back. I hit the wrong button. Add a row and go to year published, and the year published should be 1959, and search, and hopefully it will. No records, stinker. All right, Why no records? He published that in 1959. Probably is not in the database.
You gave us
Let's
the
go.
paper.
What's that?
You gave us the paper.
I know I did, but that doesn't mean that I got it from Web of Science.
If we click on eBook Central like you did, it takes us to something different than your screen.
I did not go to eBook
Click
Central.
on databases, Jack.
Click on databases. It also helps if I can spell. Author, add row. Here's something from 1976. So here's a paper published by Halling in 1976, Behavioral Model of Predator-Prey Functional Responses. When you click on that, so since it's published by Halling, it's going to have information in it that is useful. One of the things that it will have is it will have the stuff that this paper cited, but then it also, let me see if I can remember how to do this.
I know it says you to read papers that have been published since Halling 1959. Can we use like something like this that's still published by Halling, but it's just later?
What does this tell? What did you, remind me, repeat what you said?
So the specifications say that, you know, we need to use 3 papers that have been published since Halling 1959.
Yes.
So can we use papers by Halling that are just later?
Sure, you can use papers by Halling that have been published later. But the other thing that you can do, and I don't know why I cannot find this function. There used to be a function on Web of Science where you could do a backward search and a forward search. And what the backward search does is it tells you all of the papers that this study cited, but a forward search tells you all the papers that have been published in the future that cited this paper. But I don't see that functionality any longer on Web of Science.
Most recently cited by on the right there. Let's go down a little bit.
I see time cited, all time cited. I see, oh yeah, so that's most recent. So that's a bunch of really recent stuff, although 2010 isn't really recent, I don't guess. So yeah, so you can use that to basically get a list of things that have cited them. And so there's going to be in here predator functional responses discriminating between handling and digesting prey by Jeske in Ecological Monographs. And then you would then be looking for things that you could actually get access to. So use the Web of Science to help you through this process. That's a shame that they don't have that function any longer, because I used to find that really useful, the forward search and backward search function. Anyway, but it does give you recent articles, and if I go back to the page that has the 1976 article on it, you can also see view related records under 10 cited references, and so you can oftentimes find other things. And then based on the title, it will tell you whether or not you need to go and would want to go and look at something. And then when you look at the abstract, you would tell you whether or not you wanted to explore that further. So yeah, that's unfortunate that that functionality is no longer here. Yeah, I'll have to figure out what happened to that. Oh, wait. Ah, all right, I found it. So if you're on the, so this is the page, behavioral model of predator-prey functional responses. If you go down, and it disappeared. Go to time cited. So if you're looking over here on the right-hand side, citation network, it says 12 times cited. If you click on that, it will give you 12 articles that have cited this paper, the 1976 paper. And then if you go to cited references, you can click on that. There are 10 cited references in this, and I would be very surprised if Holling's paper wasn't in here. Oh yeah, there's a Holling paper that is not available. Here's another Holling paper that is not available. Here is another Holling paper that is not available. It's probably those things that are the older papers that are not available. But, so there's 1965 and 1966, and then a no date one. I'll bet if you click on that no date one and the time cited, it will be one of the earlier ones. Oh, Sharnov's optimal foraging thing, attack strategies of a mantid. He talks about functional responses and about the marginal value theorem in that paper, behavioral model of predator-prey, functional responses, which is Holling and Buckingham, which we were just looking at, predator-prey interactions in natural communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can use Web of Science to get access to more recent literature about the same topic, is I guess what I want to say to you. Does that help, Kennedy?
Yeah, at one point you told us like it might be beneficial to get, you know, one paper like on prey capture and then one on something different. What were those other things that you thought would be?
So as you're writing the introduction, you should keep in mind what are the things that affect the functional response. One of them is handling time constraints. One of them is detectability of prey. And the third one was the spatial clumping of prey. So it would be nice if you could fill out your introduction by finding other papers that talk about each of those things, independent of what Holling has said about those things, because those are the primary things that we were attempting to manipulate in class. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
This is kind of not about the content of it, but more so about the due date. I was looking at your updated schedule.
Yep.
In the updated schedule, it has the Holling paper due. That's this paper, right? The Holling paper.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Due on April 7th. Is that right?
April 7th. Why did I move it to April 7th? No, my plan was to have it due next week.
Yeah, it just has it as April 7th in that schedule. So I was kind of happy. Per se.
Right. Let me go and look at. So I was cutting and pasting and moving things around as I was making a revised schedule. Let me go and look at that.
I wouldn't hate it if you kept it that way.
Yeah, I figured you were giving us some grace period for the adapting to the online platform.
Do I seem like the type of person who would be graceful?
Yes, Dr. Kowinski.
Oh, I know why I didn't put it next week, because next week is technically advising day. And at least for some portion of you on that day, you're going to be meeting, like we're meeting right now with your advisor. So
Sweet.
I think that's probably why I postponed it to the 7th.
And
Because technically next week we don't even have lab, technically.
what, so are we not having lab for the rest of the semester? Is that what kind of the,
So we certainly can't meet for lab for the rest of the semester because we're not allowed to meet with one another. So I have a couple of things that I am thinking of doing, and I can run these by you right now, because what I want you really thinking about right now is working on the hauling paper. So tomorrow you need to get drafts of your hauling papers to one another. Do all of you have identified people that you're going to send your hauling paper to?
Yep.
More or less.
That more or less needs to be converted into a yes by tomorrow morning. So be in contact with one another and make sure that you have somebody reviewing. Two things that you should look at when you're reviewing the paper. Pay attention to chapter 6 in your writing guide. The same chapter 6 that we went through when we were reading the Lima and Dill paper earlier in the semester. Pay attention to all those kinds of common writing mistakes, as well as paying attention to the specifications on the specifications grading sheet. So pay attention to two things as you're reviewing one another's papers. My hope is that this opportunity to review one another's papers will help the person that you're reviewing for, and will also help you as you see how other people are writing about a similar topic. So later in the semester, once we're past the hauling paper, we were going to put out snake models, which we didn't get to do. But what I have is I have data from previous semesters of putting out snake models. And so one of the things that we could do is we could get together virtually and look at data from previous semesters of putting out snake models to address this question. Do snakes that have presumably mimetic patterns in a place where there is no dangerous model, do they still get the mimetic advantage because of something like migration of birds coming from Central America back into the temperate regions? They take their experience that they brought with them from the tropics, they continue to apply it in temperate regions and then continue to treat mimetic patterns as they would in the tropics or not. So you've made the models. The only difference is we didn't put them out in the field this year, but other people have put those same models out in the field in the past. So we still have that data to basically play around with. We also have data on a similar topic, but not quite as directly related to the coral snake data, which is data on aposematically colored caterpillars that some students in E&E generated and then did an independent study with me to get more data on. So they're all in that aposematic coloration mimicry sort of vein. We have data just sitting around that we can analyze and address these questions. So we can do that, which isn't the same as going out and actually doing it in the field, but it's not really that far off because basically most of what we were going to be doing, spending our time with, is putting snakes out and then walking away and leaving them there for a while and then picking the snakes back up and scoring them for attacks. So it's not like it was an involved behavioral sort of set of observations. Another thing that I'm thinking about doing, so here are a couple of possibilities. Another thing that I'm thinking about is at the beginning of the semester, we were supposed to go out and view water birds practicing vigilance. And we didn't get to go and do that because it was too cold and then we got behind in lab. So there are a set of videos that have been put online where people have filmed water birds in different group sizes, and you can classify the birds as to whether they're being vigilant or whether they're foraging. And it tells you on the video what group size the individual is in. It's essentially a virtual version of what we would have been doing in the field. It's possible to generate data from that and essentially do the water bird observation study.
all of this sounds very depressing.
So the other thing that one could do is I could send you out to find groups of Canada geese on the land. And Kennedy is shaking her head no.
What do you mean on the land? Like what land?
So Canada geese are out and about commonly throughout all of North America right now. And what we were going to do in lab is we were going to find a group of Canada geese that had roosted up on land. So Canada geese, when they're in the water, they're not really doing anything except hanging out in the water. They're just swimming around. They're relatively protected from predators because the only predator that might get them on the water is something like a bald eagle. And you can see those coming from a long way away because you're sitting on a lake or on a pond. They can't sneak up on you. When they're on land, on the other hand, they're usually on land and grassy areas under trees and things like this. Their sight lines are less visible. They have reduced sight lines, and they're foraging. And so they have to split their time between foraging and looking out for predators. As group size increases, the amount of time that you have to spend not foraging because you're looking around looking for predators goes down because you have more eyes on predators. And so oftentimes what we see is as group size goes up, the amount of vigilance practiced by any individual group member goes down because you have more eyes looking. And so we were going to, that day that it was too cold, I had actually gone out the night before scouting for places where there were geese roosting up on land so that we could come out early the next morning, find these geese in the same place, and then we could start looking at vigilance behaviors of these geese. So another alternative, since Alexis is like, oh, that sounds depressing, is I can just task you with finding your own flock of geese and go out, report goose group size, and then watch them for, you know, a certain period of time, record how much of that time is spent in foraging, how much of that time is spent in vigilance, et cetera, et cetera. There were a set of very, very discrete categories that we were going to put behaviors into that would be, it would using two different techniques, one of which is focal sampling, which is following an individual for a particular period of time, and then another type of sampling where you basically essentially look at an entire group and you measure how many individuals in the group are doing each of the behaviors at an instance of time, and then both of those tells you something about the proportion of time spent in the different kinds of behaviors. So it was going to involve two different ways of collecting behavioral data on actual organisms out in the field, which in theory would have been
to write a report on that?
You know, at the end, I didn't have a report on that. I was going to get the data from you and then basically spend a lab period analyzing the data so that you could kind of see what the data show. But the goal wasn't to write a lab report on that one. It was just to get you out in the field making observations of organisms. And it was originally scheduled to be right after the time period in class when we talked about the nature of making observations, but weather did not cooperate.
Gotcha.
So, sounds like you guys want to get out of writing a lab report on the snake model.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Likewise.
All right.
Particularly because the literature review assignment was more extensive than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, well, I hope that I had impressed upon you how extensive that was going to be. But anyway, yeah, that's a thing. Okay, so I am okay with that because unfortunately we don't get to go out in the field. Assuming one thing, that you don't at the end of the semester in your course evaluations, right? The lab was a gigantic ripoff. We didn't really do any animal behavior in lab. So, what's that?
Handshake.
Sorry, I missed that.
Metaphorical handshake.
Okay, so assuming that we can agree on that particular front, we can say goodbye to the coral snake data. What I might want to do is meet with you in lab to take you through. Wow, whoa, Alexis.
Sorry, all my volumes are on. My bad.
to take you through what the data would have looked like and things like that, so that you can see what the outcome of that would have been, and then we'll just skip that lab report. Are we all in agreement?
Yes.
Yep.
Good.
Wow,
Thank
asking
you, Denise.
students if they want to write another lab report and they all say no.
Is there a specific, like, I know that the due date for the review is the 24th. Is there a
Yes.
reason that you chose that day?
There is a reason that I chose that day. I chose that day because it's far enough out that you can get it done, because you have like now you have a month to work on it, essentially. And the other reason was that it's far enough out, but also it's not then impinging upon finals.
Because we don't have a final in this class, correct? That like basically is our final.
Oh no, we do have a final in this class. I don't know where you got the impression that we don't have a final in the class.
When is the final?
It doesn't say it anywhere on the syllabus that there's a final. That's why.
It does say it in the syllabus when you look at the assignments.
Oh.
Whoa. Where? Oh, it doesn't say, because I don't have exams listed, but if you go to the schedule,
I mean, you
I don't
have
think it's
the
on the
final
daily schedule
in
either.
the schedule, but you don't have like anything
Yeah.
about the final.
no, because I would have to look up the date of the final. So you'll see that there are three, well, where is the, Excel has been doing something weird and that it won't let me open files. Oh, there it is. So you see that there's an exam 3.
Mm-hmm.
There's exam 1, exam 2, and exam 3. There is a final, so the final is exam 4. And so there have always been 4 exams in the class. It seems very out of character for me to let you escape without a final. But from here on out, of course, all of your exams will be taken online.
What do those look like? Like what's the difference now with the exams?
The difference now is that they're all going to pretty much be multiple choice, because that's the easiest thing in order for machines to administer them.
So is the final or exam 4, is that just a regular exam, or is that like a
No,
cumulative
it's-
final? What?
No, it's going to be comprehensive, and but the last material that we cover, there's not a ton of material between the exam 3 and exam 4, and so it's going to be mostly comprehensive with a smaller portion on the material that we cover at the end.
So is it still, how many points is it? Is it worth the same amount of points? Is it still 100 points or?
I'm not sure how long it's going to be. It's going to be reduced to a percentage grade, and that percentage grade is going to be averaged in with your other things in terms of assigning your final grade. We're determining whether you're over that threshold. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Also, I feel like now is a good time to tell you that I thought the multiple choice on exam 2 was kind of confusing. So, perhaps you could take that into consideration when in writing exam 3.
I will take that into consideration. I haven't graded your exam 2 yet, so I'll see how confusing it was.
I just felt like a lot of the times I knew like which answer, like one of the answers was right and maybe one was wrong, but some of the answers I didn't feel like we ever even spoke about like similar things in class. So it was like I could pick a right one and I could maybe pick a wrong one, but there were like 2 more that I was like, I don't know. And then all of the questions are like A and F, A and B, A and C,
Chances are that if I never talked about it in class, that's not the right answer.
Well, right, but you see where that could be confusing.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I guess sometimes I felt like there could be answers that were also kind of right, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know what was necessarily like the answer you were looking for, I guess.
Okay. I'll take a look at the test when I get around to grading it, and I'll make adjustments on the next go round.
Literature review.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed it or I didn't see it on Moodle. Is there specifications or instructions on how you want us to do that? Because I don't know.
Yeah, they're in the section where the assignment is.
Oh, okay.
Let me go to Moodle.
I think you attached
So-
them to our emails too, maybe, perhaps.
That was our topic, but I didn't see a instruction.
Literature. So March 15th to March 21st, there's a folder called Literature Review Materials, and the only thing in the folder is the Literature Review Specifications Grading Rubric.
I see it. Okay.
And that's also where the due date of April 24th is. So Kennedy, you had a question about the due date. Was there a reason for that question?
Yeah, I was under the impression that we didn't have a final, and so I was kind of wondering why it was so early.
Oh,
Yeah.
the due date for that?
Yeah.
The two reasons that I have for that was one, getting it done. It was getting it done the week before we were going to be having senior research presentations, final senior research presentations, which are the last week of class, and also not pushing it into finals week.
Have the faculty been meeting about senior research presentations? 'Cause
What's that?
Have the faculty been discussing senior research? Because we haven't gotten anything from Dr. Price since the whole everything's gone forever by mail.
Yes. There was a set of emails that went around over spring break. Faculty in biology and chemistry are discussing options. Right now, the option for seniors, there are 3 seniors who have senior research presentations that are still needing to do their preliminary data presentations. We're going to meet in this environment and have them present those to everyone. And then we're discussing different options for how to do final presentations. For juniors, there was going to be a poster presentation over in the PLC where you would present a poster on your proposal that you wrote last semester. We're also discussing ways of accomplishing that task as well. Dr. Price is kind of spearheading that. I think the only 2 people that he's heard back from, or at least that copied everybody, was Dr. Reynolds and myself, but hopefully now that we're all back, those decisions will be made sooner rather than later. Clearly, we're not having research meetings today, but the plan is to meet with on Zoom next Monday at 3 o'clock, all of you coming and checking in. It is possible to put a bunch of people on Zoom because we had a faculty meeting this morning that was on Zoom, and a surprisingly large chunk of faculty were on that meeting. So the technology seems to work out just fine. So no research meeting today, but probably a research meeting next week.
So as a senior, I should probably be expecting to give a 20-minute presentation over Zoom.
I'm not sure yet. You are going to probably have to do some type of presentation in some format. And there's discussions going on right now what that will actually entail. But yeah, you don't just get to skip away scot-free. Once again,
What if your data hasn't changed since your preliminary presentation and you'd basically be redoing your?
Yeah, so hopefully in a final presentation, you would have more time because those preliminary data presentations are much shorter. You would have more time to talk about what the data actually are and what they mean. It's impossible to get more data. So when we go to grade you, we can't grade you down because you don't have any more data than when you did your preliminary data presentation, because we prohibited you from coming into the lab and gathering any data.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. we have to scale what our expectations are of you, given that there's certain things that we can't expect of you any longer. And we're not going to be assholes and hold you to a criterion that you shouldn't be held to. So, first rule of life, don't be an asshole. All right, other questions about mechanics?
Yeah, I do. Is it, I know we're kind of just working through the kinks right now, but is there a reason why we can't just do the slideshows with you every day on the Zoom? Because like, I don't know, I had questions along the way, and then by the time it was over, I felt like I had so many like little clarification type deals and whatnots that we'd spend the whole time on that. We'd basically be going through the whole lecture again on this meeting.
We can try that. Let's see how this works first, because two things that you should be doing prior to meeting is at least reading the book. And now at this point, reading the book is combined with watching what is hopefully a relatively easy to digest video. But we can try that. Let me know how the rest of today goes, and then we'll talk about it at the end.
Okay.
So as you're watching, write down your questions that you have, and then we'll come to those questions like now.
By the way, the final is on that Friday.
Oh, I do recall that. I hate Friday finals.
Yeah, it's Friday, May. Oh wait, hold on. Oh wait, I'm looking at it wrong.
I can look it up also.
12:30. Just kidding, it's Thursday. May 14th at 11 to 1.
Yep, it's Thursday, 11 to 1.
So if we're taking a test in this class and we have a question, are we supposed to just like call you?
Yeah, you guys all have my phone number. You can call me or email me, either one. Yeah, and so here's the other thing. You just have to be on your best honor code behavior, because I don't have any control over the testing environment beyond the time that the test is available.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to trust you, that you have your best interests in terms of me assessing you correctly, and you have to trust me to, once again, grant you a little bit of leeway in things like not doing the last lab report and stuff like that.
Can we get Socrative on our computers, or is that only iPad?
I think you can do it either way.
Okay.
I would have to check that, but I create the exams on my computer, and then most people take them on the iPad, but I don't know why you couldn't take it on the computer as well.
You can. I'm pretty sure you can take it on the computer.
I haven't ever tried it, is the only reason.
I can just do it on my iPad. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about competition then. What kinds of questions did you have, Alexis, or anyone else?
Will you re-clarify the graph with all the lines?
The graph with all the lines. Hold on just a minute, and I will maybe be able to clarify that.
Like, I don't understand why some of the lines don't stop at the brown curve.
Yeah, I figured that. I figured it was the ideal free distribution curve.
Yeah.
This guy right here. So, did you view this in PowerPoint?
I just watched your screencast.
Oh, then you should have. That's true. You should have seen all of that. So let me get it in full screen. So whenever you are, let me get myself a pointer here. So whenever you're thinking about this, this is a situation where there's a rich patch and a poor patch. The rich patch is in blue. The poor patch is in brown. And so when individual one, so this first line here basically represents what the maximum reward is from the poor patch. And the horizontal line basically just follows this over to where it intersects with the gain that is the exact same gain in the rich patch. So as you add individuals, you add individual 1, individual has to make the decision, do I go into the poor patch or do I go into the rich patch? Well, at this point, there's nobody else around, so it makes sense to go into the richer patch. So it goes into the blue patch and gets the highest reward possible. Individual 2 comes along and it says, do I go into the rich patch or I go into the poor patch? Well, if I go into the rich patch, I suffer a little bit of drop in reward, but not nearly as much as being the first individual into the poor patch. Same thing happens for individual 3. Do I go into rich or poor? As long as the rich patch still gives you more reward than the poor patch, you should go into the rich patch, which is the case for individual 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. But now, individual 9, it's a little bit of a harder decision. Do I go into the rich patch or do I go into the poor patch? The rich patch still has a little more reward than the poor patch. So individual 9 should go into the rich patch. But individual 10 comes in, and individual 10, if it went into the rich patch, it's now getting less reward than if it was just the first individual in the poor patch. So individual 10 doesn't go into the rich patch. Individual 10 actually becomes the first individual in the poor patch. Individual 11 comes along and also still goes into the poor patch because the decline isn't so low that it's below going into the rich patch. Individual 12 comes along. This is their reward. It's still slightly higher than being the 10th individual in the rich patch. So it stays in the poor patch. It goes to the poor patch. Individual 13 comes along though, and that's where it would be if it was in the rich patch. And it has a slightly higher reward going into the rich patch than going into the poor patch. You can see this intersection here. This is the reward for the rich patch. This is the reward that you would get being in the poor patch. And so 13, rather than going to the poor patch, 13 would go into the rich patch. It would be the 10th individual in the rich patch. And then the 14th individual would experience a significant decline, so they should not go into the rich patch. They should actually be the 4th individual into the poor patch. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that's how the ideal free distribution works. If you're in the express line, it's faster to go into the express line because all the individuals have, in theory, less than 12 items. But as the express line gets longer and longer and longer, it might be better to get into a regular lane behind one person with a lot of items because that's actually fewer total items than to be the last person in the queue in the express lane.
So these are equally distributed because of the quality of the patch. So like the 10 individuals in the rich patch is equal to the 4 in the poor patch. Like they're being, like they have equal distribution of reward because of the quality of the patch.
Yeah, so at this point, these 10 individuals in the rich patch are distributed because they're all getting approximately the same reward as the 4 individuals in the poor patch. And that's what makes the ideal free distribution. It doesn't mean that there are the same number of individuals in the patches. It means that the individuals are proportionally distributed with patch quality. Exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What other questions do you have?
In the screencast, you kind of just like very briefly go over iterative games, and I didn't really understand. I mean, like we go over the hawk dove stuff.
So hawk dove works out this way.
But then,
yeah. So go ahead, finish your question.
Yeah, but then I just didn't, like you just very briefly go through iterative games, and then I just didn't really understand what those meant.
Yeah, so iterative games, the reason I didn't go through the math is much more complicated. So this equilibrium, so you can see the equilibrium for hawk dove on the screen. So this equilibrium only works if you're only encountering the individual that you're playing with once. And then figuring out the rewards is relatively uncomplicated because you don't have any shared history with the individuals that you're interacting with. The rules of the game change, though, if you're going to be encountering that same individual a second or third or fourth or fifth time. And because you're encountering that individual multiple times, it probably is going to change the payoff matrix. So if you know that you're going to be encountering the same individual time after time after time, going hawk all the time might not actually be the best tactic within this game, because you know every time I go hawk, that person's going to go hawk, et cetera, et cetera. So in iterative games, a lot of times the evolutionarily stable strategy is to condition your tactic on the basis of the tactic that other individuals are playing, knowing that you're going to encounter these individuals in the future. So, for example, game theory has been applied a lot in geopolitical scenarios. So back during the Cold War, when we were at conflict with the USSR, with the Soviets, about the arms race, the actual arms race with nuclear warheads, they hired a ton of game theoreticians in the Defense Department to basically play out scenarios of how the US should respond to movements by Russia. And so in this scenario, the US and Russia are going to be interacting with one another repeatedly over many, many, many years. And so while in any given single encounter, the best strategy might be to take a very hawkish approach and like do a first strike against Russia, which is fine, assuming that Russia doesn't have time to retaliate, and assuming that you can knock out all of their nuclear arms. But of course, you can't knock out all of their nuclear arms because we don't know where all of them are. And so because some of their nuclear arsenal is going to survive, that would be a really stupid move to take a first strike against Russia, because they would just retaliate with another strike against us. They would take out whatever of our arms we didn't use, minus those that we have hidden well that they don't know about. And then we would just get in this escalating war that would lead to probably a nuclear winter and an apocalyptic, you know, post-war scenario. Hopefully, unlike the current apocalyptic scenario that we're in right now with COVID. So knowing that we would be involved in this interaction with Russia for decades, rather than playing single one-off games, they used iterative game theory. So the best decision now isn't maybe what would be the best option if we only met up with Russia once, but a longer-term solution would be one that assumes that you're going to be coming up against this opponent repeatedly. And over time, what the strategists in the Defense Department said was, what you should be doing is not ramping up the production of arms, but actually cooperating on ramping down arms. And so in this case, the best evolutionarily stable strategy for these two countries was actually to go the opposite direction, to become more dovish in a way than hawkish. And what happened in the 1980s and 90s was a series of treaties with Russia that were designed to reduce both countries' overall arsenal size. And that has actually worked out pretty well over the long run. And so anytime you're going to be iterating interactions, that might lead to different outcomes than if it's just a one-off. So oftentimes, the strategy that Axelrod came up with was this tit for tat strategy. You predicate your behavior on the behavior that that individual last behaved towards you. And so if you come into a hawk-dove scenario and one individual plays dove, then you should play dove. If you come into the scenario and that individual is playing hawk, you should play hawk. And that ends up being the most stable strategy, this strategy that is conditioned on the behavior of the other individual in this case. So that's all it is. And they're really complicated to work out mathematically, which is why we didn't do the math. Does that help?
When you
Okay.
say that if the individual that comes in is playing Hawk, you should play Hawk, you mean that
Mhm.
you should play Hawk at that time, or you should play Hawk at the next one?
You should play that. You should play Hawk that time, and every other time that you see that individual, you should play Hawk, because
Gotcha.
you know that person plays Hawk.
What if you've seen an individual that you haven't seen before?
Once again, you would generally employ the method, whatever the tactic is, that is suitable for the rules of a one-off game. But then, now that you have experience with that individual, you should then predicate all your future behaviors on the basis of what their behavior was.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That's why it's called a tit for tat. And you see these things playing off on the playground all the time. When you were on a playground in junior high, how did you interact with your fellow human beings?
Politely.
Why? Not a rhetorical question.
Probably to gain friends or something.
Okay, so you might behave politely because that's a good strategy, a good tactic to gain friends. So you go and behave politely to a mean girl, and the mean girl is mean to you, from the movie Mean Girls. Should you continue to be polite to that person?
Something on a moral compass.
What's that?
No, I said it depends on your moral compass.
It depends on your moral compass. But if your strategy is to take a dove-like approach and be polite and welcoming, et cetera, and the individual that you interact with behaves meanly, what are you more likely to do?
Behave
mean
meanly.
Yeah, you're likely to be mean back to them. That's a classic tit for tat strategy. If you're open and welcoming and the other person is open and welcoming, you're both benefiting from that relationship. But you being open and welcoming while Rachel McAdams is being mean to you, it actually ends up being great for her and negative for you. You're back in the hawk-dove scenario. She's playing hawk, you're playing dove. That's great for the hawk. It's terrible for the dove. So knowing that you're going to see this person every day in high school, what should you do? Tit for tat. Dish out exactly what they're dishing to you. Is the strategy that a game would say. If, for example, the payoff was social capital. Have you guys seen the movie Mean Girls?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why did Rachel McAdams continue to behave that way during the entire movie? Well, because the gains that she got from being that way were much greater than the outcomes that she would have gotten playing a more dove-like strategy in terms of social capital. That's the first time I've ever used the movie Mean Girls in a class.
Know what the heck Mean Girls is?
Luke, you should watch the movie Mean Girls.
I guess I have to.
What's that?
I guess I should now.
Yep. View it through the lens of game theory. What else?
I had a question about territory defense.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's figure 5.7 when we talk about that. My first overarching question was, I kind of got lost when you were talking about exploitative or interference competition.
Okay.
And so because you were talking about when it switched from one type to the other, and I didn't get how to recognize when that switch would occur.
So exploitation, whenever you're looking at exploitative competition, it's almost always involving a situation where resources are distributed in such a way that they can't be controlled. And so you only have interference competition kicking in when you have resources that are localized enough that you can actually control access to those resources. So I think what you're thinking about is this situation. Would you say 5.8?
5.7, where you have those two graphs side by side.
Okay,
We're
yeah.
talking about
So,
costs. Yeah, this one.
so when you think about once again, what type of territories you have a territory that is rich in resources and you have a territory that is poor in resources. This figure is basically about what territory size you should maintain. And so these are the benefits, the red line and this purple line, at least I think that's a purple line. And then this other purple line is the cost line. And so if you're in a rich territory, then the distance between rich and poor, the distance between the benefits versus the costs, where that distance is maximized, that's the optimal territory size. Poor requires a larger territory to defend because it's a poorer territory overall, and you're trying to once again maximize the benefit relative to the cost, but because it's poorer, you actually get fewer benefits overall, even though you're maintaining a larger territory. But there comes a point where the cost exceeds the benefit. As soon as the cost of defending a territory exceeds the benefit of defending that territory, you should abandon defending that territory. The territory has gotten so large that you can't defend it against any competitors. Well, why would your territory be that large? Well, if it's a rich territory, it means there's plenty of food there. Let's say the food is the thing that you're guarding against. There's plenty of food there, but it's so widely distributed that you can't really control access to it. So the costs of territory defense exceed the benefit of having exclusive access to that. And so what you should do above that size, if you have to maintain a territory larger than that to get the benefit, the cost of maintaining that territory is too high. You should stop defending and just concentrate on exploiting the resource as well as you can, knowing that other individuals are going to be exploiting that resource also.
So exploitive begins after the cost begins to exceed the benefit?
Yep. So from this point, you see where my pointer is right here?
Yep.
At that point, that's the largest territory that anybody should ever maintain, because if you go any above that, the costs exceed the benefits. And so you're actually losing. But in reality, the optimal territory size is way down here, where the difference between the benefit and the cost is the biggest. So you should never actually get anywhere out here. But if you ever do find yourself out here, there's really no reason to be defending a territory out in this range. So this is a model to predict optimal territory size, but this model not only predicts optimal territory size, but it also predicts a hard cutoff of where you should verge from resource defense to just going with exploitative competition. And so in the next figure, you basically see these birds that are patrolling a stream side. Well, as the renewal rate of food goes up, the food is abundant enough, but because it's along a stream, there's no real gain. Well, let's see. Am I saying this correctly? Yeah, when food is not being renewed very often, there's less food overall, such that defending others against that small amount of food is beneficial. Is this right? Sharing, that's sorry, I had it flipped. That's why I was trying to think in my mind why it wasn't making sense. if food is not very abundant, it's less concentrated. As a result, you benefit. You don't really lose much for sharing because you're spending way more time and energy in fending off competitors for this already limited food. When food is abundant enough, it becomes economically beneficial to control that richer resource, even though it may take more energy to control access to that resource. That energy is worthwhile because the resource is much more, a much greater resource. And so you would see no, I screwed that up again. Sharing predicted out here where food is in great abundance, sharing not predicted down here where food is in lesser abundance. So sorry, I'm fritzing out. I'm pretty sure I explained it the correct way in the screencast. So less food, less defensible. As a result, you allow individuals. Sorry. Lower renewal weights, less food, protect the less food, even if it's costly. If there's more food, you don't have to control access to it because there's enough to go around for both individuals, and so you would expect individuals to share. That's what figure 5.8 means. Sorry, it took me a minute to wrap my head around it. And I can't see your faces, but I'm sure you're all looking at me like, what is up with him? So anyway, that is that. Did that help, Jack, or not?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
You talk about like a distinction between strategy and tactic, but I didn't really catch that.
So
the distinction.
So when we think about an evolutionarily stable strategy, so that's where the term strategy comes from. A strategy is this broad description of a game. And in the evolutionarily stable strategy of the hawk-dove game, there is this strategy, which is which of these two tactics do you play at any given time to get the best benefit, whatever that benefit is in terms of how it's measured. And so in the ESS that is the hawk-dove game, there are two tactics. You can play hawk or you can play dove. And the degree to which you rely on those two tactics is dependent upon what are the underlying rules of the game. And so the strategy is a broader description of what your behavioral options are in the broad scale of the game. The tactics are what each of those individual tactics within that strategy are. And so yeah, so the strategy is the rule, but the rule is basically, do I play hawk or do I play dove? Both of those tactics are available to you. The strategy is basically, when should I play those tactics? Under what conditions do I play those two tactics? And so these behavioral patterns that are played as part of a strategy, those are tactics. The strategy is the broader thing that has options, and depending on the rules of the game, what are the options that get employed at any time? And the options in this case are the tactics.
So hawk or dove would be, so you could have the hawk tactic or the dove tactic, and then
Yes.
the strategy would be whether or not to use hawk or dove.
Yes, or what proportion of time. So remember that I said in figuring out the hawk-dove game, go back to figuring out the equilibrium for hawk-dove. So we get to this equilibrium of a 50-50 mix of hawk-dove. It could be that hawk and dove are genetically determined so that individual A always plays hawk and individual B always plays dove. So it could be hardwired such that, oh, you're just a hawk and oh, you're just a dove. But it could just as easily be individual A has the ability to play hawk or dove. But the evolutionarily stable strategy here is that individual A should play hawk 50% of the time and play dove 50% of the time. And it doesn't matter which of those is the genetically encoded thing. The decision-making process of saying, I'm playing hawk 50% of the time and dove 50% of the time, or it can be genetically coded that individual A plays hawk 100% of the time and individual B plays dove 100% of the time. And it's that way for everybody in the population. So in one case, a population would be made up of, let's say you have a population of 100 individuals, 50 of those individuals would play hawk all the time and 50 of those individuals would play dove all the time. Or you could have 100 individuals that have the ability to alter the tactic that they employ, but each of those individuals, all 100 of them, should play hawk 50% of the time and play dove 50% of the time. In game theory, either of those scenarios is equally suitable. Does that make sense?
Yep.
What else? Alexis, you seem to have more questions, or are we getting them?
It's like they're not like big overarching questions. They're more just like I don't know. It's kind of like how you just described that graph to Logan or Jack or whoever it was who asked the question, and it was just kind of like little clarifications. And I feel like we do that in class all the time, where it's like, oh, we don't really get this graph. Let's have like a little bit more of a clarification of it. It's like I get what you're saying in the screencast, but if I could, if like along the way we could talk about it, I just feel like that'd be more beneficial to me. I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels, but it's like now we've spent 2 hours plus doing what we normally do in an hour and
I agree with Alexis.
15 minutes, and I feel like it's kind of like trying to double understand the same things when I could just singularly understand them better one at a time.
Okay, so why don't we do this? For Wednesday, I will not upload a screencast, which I was about to put together right before we met today, and we'll go through things in real time on living in groups. The reading assignments are in the new updated revised schedule, so be sure and read those pages. And we'll just try and hold class online the way we normally.
Like I don't want to upset you.
No, you're not upsetting me, because this is my first time doing this. But what I need you to have read the book so that process goes well, and we'll try that on. As we chat, I need to not overspeak people, because I think I know what the question is that's coming. And then the other thing is, you guys will need to help me make sure that everybody who has questions is getting questions answered, because I can see you in class and see, oh, you person, you have a quizzical look on your face. I think you might not be getting something, but I can't do that as well over this medium. So I really do need you to speak up when you do have questions. Some of you speak up more than others, and so I just will need everybody to behave in a way that when I can't read your body language and know that something isn't being grasped, I don't just continue to blithely move on thinking everything is understood.
At one point, I thought it used to give us the opportunity to raise our hand on this thing. Like you could click a button that says raise your hand, but I'm not seeing it anymore.
So it does. And so the unfortunate thing right now is that I'm in, oh no, I can't get it up. I am in, So I'm still learning technology. So I'm sharing my screen with you, which is what I would be doing. And as a result, I don't have any control over moving things around. So I have all participants up, so I could see if you were raising your hand.
Do you see it now? Because I just clicked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, but it's on top of my, it's on top of the slide, and I can't move it off of the slide because I'm casting this screen to you. So now I just can't do anything.
It says you're recording the
Oh,
Zoom. Are you gonna save that and upload it like you would a lecture?
Yes. So I did that. I did that earlier this morning. Somehow I managed to stop sharing my screen. So like now I can see your faces, but before I couldn't see your faces. And I need to figure out a way of, what time are we at? Oh, we're past time. You guys need to be going to your next class.
where's the raise hand?
You go
Where's
to
what?
participants, and
Participants.
then you click raise hand.
Yeah, participants, there's a little raise hand thing somewhere.
Yeah.
I can raise my hand, yay. Yeah, so let me see. So I've got that up now. Let me see what I do when I share screen.
Luke class.
Playing with it.
Yeah, so whenever I pull up participants, it puts it right on top of my screen. So let me see if I can figure out how to do that. So let's do this for Wednesday. No screencast between now and Wednesday. Read the section of the book. We'll meet together and we'll try and hold like what seems like a normal class. And today in my applied stats class, I flipped back and forth between sharing screen with students and doing things on my whiteboard in my office. So I was able to flip around pretty well earlier today, but if I'm in full screen mode, I have to basically get out of screen mode, which I can't seem to do right now for whatever reason.
We have the option to swap the video and the screencast on our end too. when you're sharing your screen, so we can do it ourselves too.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to figure out a little more about how to operate this. And I just managed to do it accidentally. So I'll try and figure that out between now and Wednesday. So we'll just have regular meeting time. I'll have a PowerPoint that I've already put together, and we'll do regular class.
Sounds good.
Get your papers to one another to review. You basically get them back to people, since we've pushed the due date out, get them back to people by Friday, so that they then have enough time to revise.
So the daily schedule is correct.
Yeah, we'll just leave that at April 7th.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
All right, you guys stay safe, be sane.
See you later.
See ya. Bye.
After-